I am Courtney. I'm a 30-year-old lady who enjoys planning and statistics. My life is solid, and I work at a good job. People have always complimented me on my aptitude with numbers, which has been really helpful to me. But when I met Michael, everything was different. Michael and I met at a party. Normally, I'm not a party animal, but my friend Sarah talked me into going. She'd urged, "Come on, Courtney, you need to get out more." I was standing by myself at the party, clutching a drink, when Michael approached me. His smile put everyone at ease, and he was tall. "Hi, my name is Michael." Reaching out a hand, he replied, "I don't think we've met." I gave him a handshake. "I'm Courtney," he said. "So, Courtney, what brings you here?" I gave a shrug. "I was dragged here by my pal. I don't really enjoy going to parties." "Me neither," Michael chuckled. "But sometimes it's good to get out of your comfort zone." We conversed for some time. It was a pleasure to speak with Michael. He listened to me and made me smile. He talked to me about his passion for vintage films and his work at a neighborhood bookshop. I informed him about my interest in puzzles and my work as an accountant. As the evening wore on, we discovered ourselves seated apart from the throng, engrossed in our discussion. It was peculiar how effortlessly we could relate despite our extreme differences. Michael asked for my phone number after the party ended. "Courtney, I want to see you again. Could we perhaps go get coffee?" After hesitating, I nodded. After that night, we began dating. "Sure, that would be nice." We spent hours talking, watching films and going on dates. Michael made me feel unique. He was lovely and caring. One thing, though, worried me. Michael didn't make a lot of plans. He was the antithesis of me in that he lived in the now. I enjoy making plans because it gives me a sense of power. I mentioned this once. "Michael, do you not feel that you ought to plan more? Having a plan is crucial." Michael merely grinned. "Courtney, I am happy with my lifestyle. Planning is helpful, but occasionally you just need to go with the flow." I liked him too much to disagree with him, even though I didn't understand. As the months went by, our bond got deeper. Michael took me to a peaceful area near the river one evening. The stars were out and the air was crisp on this lovely night. Michael turned to face me and said, "Courtney, I love you." Although I am aware of our differences, I believe it is what makes us unique. "Are you going to marry me?" It stunned me. Though marriage was a significant step, I could see honesty and love in Michael's eyes. "Yes, Michael, I'll marry you," I replied. And that's how things changed in my life. Michael was a nice, laid-back man who lived in the present, and I, Courtney, the woman who loved planning and numbers, was going to marry him. It was a surprise, but that's the way life can sometimes be. You never know what to expect. I had envisioned a small wedding with only close friends and family, a straightforward ceremony, and perhaps dinner afterwards when Michael and I made the decision to tie the knot. However, things did not turn out how I had planned. To share the news, we met the parents of each other. My folks took a quick liking to Michael. My father shook Michael's hand and stated, "He's a simple, honest man." Conversely, Michael's parents appeared relieved. "It's good that you found someone serious," sighed Margaret, his mother. Michael and I got down with our parents and began to arrange the wedding. A simple wedding was what I had in mind. I started to look to Michael for encouragement. Margaret had different views, but he nodded in accord. "Oh no, sweetheart. Our only son is Michael. Our wedding has to be really large. We should invite all of our friends and relatives. It must be magnificent." Margaret resisted my attempts to argue, saying, "That's not what we want." But Michael wasn't on board with me. "Kearney, Mum knows best. Let's comply with her wishes." And so the planning for the wedding started. It was not at all what I had hoped for. Strangers I had never met were invited, and the guest list kept becoming longer. Everything was over the top. The decorations were lavish, and the space was enormous. I tried to talk to Michael one day when we were tasting cakes. "Michael, this is just too much. We didn't intend for this." But Michael just shrugged. "It's just one day, Courtney. Let's make everyone happy." The wedding day arrived. I stood in a dressing room, wearing a dress that was too big and too fancy. Sarah was there, trying to cheer me up. "You look beautiful, Courtney." I forced a smile. "Thanks, Sarah. I just wish this was different." As I walked down the aisle, I saw so many faces, most of which I didn't recognize. The ceremony was a blur. I said, "I do," but my heart was heavy. The reception was even worse. Loud music, too many people, and Margaret hovering around, making sure everything was as she wanted. At one point, I stepped outside for some air. Michael found me. "Hey, are you okay?" I looked at him, feeling a mix of emotions. "This isn't what I wanted, Michael. This isn't us." Michael took my hand. "I know, Courtney, but it's just one day. We have our whole lives ahead of us." I wanted to believe him, but standing there, surrounded by a celebration that felt more like an ordeal, I couldn't help but wonder if I had made a mistake. I loved Michael, but our wedding, something that was supposed to be about us, had turned into something unrecognizable, and that worried me. The days after the wedding were supposed to be happy, but they weren't. Michael and I settled into our new life, but something had changed. And then Margaret came into the picture in a way I hadn't expected. It was a Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for work when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Margaret standing there with a suitcase. "Margaret, what a surprise. Is everything okay?" I asked, confused. "Oh dear, I thought Michael told you. I'm staying with you for a while. My house is being renovated," she said, pushing past me. I was stunned. Michael hadn't mentioned anything. I called him at work. "Michael, why didn't you tell me your mom was staying with us?" "Oh, I forgot. It's just for a few weeks, Courtney. It's not a big deal," he said casually. But it was a big deal. Margaret didn't just stay with us. She took over our lives. She had opinions on everything, what we ate, how we cleaned, and especially how we spent our money. One evening, I came home to find Margaret sitting at the kitchen table with our bills spread out in front of her. "What are you doing, Margaret?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm looking at your expenses. You're spending too much. As a family, we need to save," she said, not looking up. I was shocked. "Margaret, these are our personal finances. It's not your place." Margaret finally looked at me. "As your mother-in-law and an elder, it is my place. I'm just trying to help." I wanted to argue, but I knew it wouldn't help. I walked away, feeling frustrated and invaded. The situation got worse. Margaret criticized everything I did. One Saturday, I was making breakfast when she walked into the kitchen. "You're making pancakes? That's too many carbs. You should make something healthier," she said, frowning. I took a deep breath. "Margaret, I appreciate your concern, but I can make my own decisions about what I eat." She tutted. "I'm just saying a wife should take care of her health." I felt my anger rising, but before I could say anything, Michael walked in. "What's going on?" he asked. "Your mother is telling me how to cook now," I said, my voice shaking with anger. Michael looked uncomfortable. "Mom, maybe you should let Courtney do her thing." Margaret rolled her eyes. "Fine, but don't blame me if things go wrong." That night, I tried to talk to Michael. "I can't live like this. Your mother is controlling everything." Michael sighed. "She's just trying to help, Courtney. She's old and set in her ways." "But this is our home, Michael. We should make our own decisions," I argued. Michael didn't say anything. He just went to bed, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I had reached my limit with Margaret's constant meddling and criticism, especially regarding our finances. It was time to take a stand. One evening, as we all sat in the living room, I decided to bring up the subject. "Margaret, I've been thinking," I began, trying to keep my tone neutral. "How about we do an experiment for 1 month? Let's keep separate budgets for our expenses, then we can compare and see who's more efficient with money." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "An experiment? Interesting. You think you can manage better than me?" I nodded. "Yes, I do." Michael looked uneasy. "Courtney, is this necessary?" "Yes, Michael, it is." "I think it's a fair challenge," I said firmly. Margaret smiled, almost smugly. "All right, dear. Challenge accepted." So, the battle of budgets began. I kept meticulous records of every penny I spent, making sure to be as efficient as possible. Meanwhile, I noticed Michael sneaking extra cash from the joint account, but I didn't say anything. The month flew by, and soon it was time to compare our expenses. We sat down at the dining table, each with our records. "Let's see what you've got, Courtney," Margaret said with a confident smile. I laid out my documents showing every transaction and bill. "As you can see, I've managed to save quite a bit this month, even with all the regular expenses." Margaret looked over the papers, her smile fading slightly. "Not bad, but let's see what Michael has." Michael cleared his throat. "Well, I didn't spend much, just the usual stuff." I decided it was time to reveal what I knew. "Michael, what about the extra money you took from our joint account?" Michael's face turned red. I needed it for some personal things." I pulled out the bank statements from the joint account. "Here's the proof. Your spending was higher than mine this month." Margaret's face was a mix of surprise and anger. "Michael, you lied. Why?" Michael didn't have an answer. He just looked down, embarrassed. I turned to Margaret. "As you can see, I'm quite capable of managing our finances efficiently." Margaret was silent for a moment. Then she looked up, her expression hard. "Fine. You've made your point. But this doesn't change anything. I still believe I know what's best for this family." I let out a sigh. It was a small victory, but I knew the battle was far from over. Margaret's control over our lives was still a problem, and Michael's lack of support was even more concerning. But at least I had proven my point. I was good with numbers, and I knew how to manage money. It was a start, but I knew there were more challenges ahead. The air was tense after the budget challenge. Margaret's attitude towards me hadn't improved, and Michael was still avoiding any confrontation. I knew something had to give, and soon it did, but not in the way I expected. It was a Saturday morning, and I was in the kitchen making coffee when Margaret walked in, her expression stern. "Courtney, we need to talk," she said, her voice sharp. I turned to face her. "Okay, Margaret, what's on your mind?" "It's about your attitude towards money. You're too controlling, too greedy. It's not healthy," she accused. I was taken aback. "Greedy, Margaret? I'm just trying to be responsible with our finances." Margaret shook her head. "No, you're hoarding. You don't want to share. You don't understand what it means to be part of a family." I felt my frustration rising. That's not true. I work hard for my money, and I think it's fair to want to manage it wisely. Before I could say more, Michael walked in. "What's going on?" "Your wife," Margaret said, turning to him, "is too obsessed with money. It's not right." Michael looked at me, then at his mother. "Courtney, maybe you should ease up a bit. Mom has a point." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Michael, you're taking her side after all the evidence I showed you." Michael shrugged. "I just think we should all get along." That was the last straw. I stormed out of the kitchen and went to our home office. I pulled out the documents I had been keeping, proof of all the money Michael had been giving to Margaret without my knowledge. I gathered everything and went back to the kitchen. Okay, you want to talk about money? Let's talk, I said, my voice steady but firm. I laid out the documents on the table, bank statements, receipts, everything. Here's proof of all the money Michael has been giving you, Margaret. Most of it is from my earnings. Margaret's face turned red. That's none of your business. He's my son and he's helping his mother. I looked at Michael. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Michael looked away. I just wanted to help her. I turned back to Margaret. And what about the wedding? You wanted a grand affair. Who do you think paid for that? It was me, against my wishes. Margaret was silent, her mouth a tight line. I took a deep breath. I've had enough. This is not how a family should be. I work hard for my money, and I won't be accused of being greedy or controlling for wanting to manage it responsibly. Margaret looked at me, her eyes cold. So what are you going to do? I met her gaze. I'm going to think about what's best for me. This can't go on. With that, I left the room. I felt a mix of anger, frustration, and sadness. My marriage was crumbling, and the family I had hoped to be part of was nothing like I had imagined. It was time to make some tough decisions, but for the moment, I just needed some space to think and to breathe. The house felt colder. The walls seemed to echo my thoughts. I spent the next few days mostly in silence, contemplating my next steps. I knew a conversation with Michael was inevitable, and it came sooner than I expected. It was a quiet evening when Michael walked into the living room where I was sitting, a determined look on his face. We need to talk, Courtney, he said. I nodded. Yes, we do. He took a deep breath. I've been thinking, and I've made a decision. I waited, my heart pounding. I want things to go back to how they were. I want to spend my money how I like. I don't want to argue about it anymore, he said. I looked at him, trying to keep my emotions in check. Michael, it's not just about the money. It's about respect, trust, and partnership. We're supposed to be in this together. He shook his head. I can't live like this, constantly being questioned and judged. So I'm giving you an ultimatum. Let me spend without restraint or we get a divorce. His words hit me like a punch. I felt a mix of disbelief and clarity. You're giving me an ultimatum? Yes, he said firmly. I took a moment to gather my thoughts. Okay, Michael, if that's how you see our marriage, then I agree to the divorce. He seemed taken aback. You agree? Just like that? I stood up, feeling a sense of resolve. Yes, just like that. I won't be part of a marriage where my partner doesn't respect me or our future together. I deserve better. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Courtney, are you sure? I nodded. Yes, I'm sure. I want a partner who stands with me, not against me, and clearly that's not you. Michael didn't say anything more. He just turned and left the room. I sat back down, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was taking control of my life. The ultimatum was meant to corner me, but instead, it had set me free. The house felt different after Michael left, quiet, empty, but it was a space I was ready to reclaim. I began by reorganizing, rearranging furniture, and redecorating. It was therapeutic, a way of wiping the slate clean. One evening, while sorting through old photographs, my phone rang. It was Sarah, a dear friend I hadn't seen in months. Courtney, how are you holding up? Sarah's voice was warm, laced with concern. I'm managing, Sarah, just taking it one day at a time, I replied. I can't believe Michael did that. And his mom, I never trusted her, Sarah added. I let out a soft laugh. You and me both, but it's over now. I'm focusing on what's ahead. You're so strong, Courtney. Hey, why don't we catch up soon? It's been too long, Sarah suggested. That sounds perfect. Let's do it, I agreed, feeling a flicker of excitement. We met the next evening at a cozy cafe, a place brimming with memories. Sarah's presence was comforting, a reminder of life beyond my recent troubles. Courtney, I'm so proud of you. You're handling this like a champ, Sarah said as we sipped our coffee. I shrugged modestly. I don't have a choice, Sarah. I refuse to let this break me. You're amazing. Remember, I'm always here if you need anything, she said, squeezing my hand across the table. I smiled genuinely. Thank you, Sarah. That means the world to me. Life gradually regained its rhythm. I reconnected with friends, found solace in quiet evenings with books, and poured myself into my work. I was rediscovering myself, piece by piece. Then one day, out of the blue, my phone rang. It was Michael. Courtney, I want to apologize. Can we talk? His voice was unsteady. I hesitated but answered. Go ahead, Michael. I was wrong, terribly wrong. Living with my mom is impossible. She's never satisfied, and I can't keep up with her demands. I don't have enough money. I need to come back home, he pleaded. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. Michael, I accepted your apology, but it changes nothing. We had our time, and it's over now. I've moved on. Courtney, please. I cut him off. No, Michael, this is my life, and I'm not going back to how things were. Take care of yourself. Hanging up, I felt a surge of empowerment. I had picked up the pieces of my shattered life, and I wasn't about to scatter them again. I was whole on my own, and that was all I needed. Months had passed since the divorce was finalized, and each day felt like a step forward. The journey hadn't been easy, but it was mine, and I cherished every bit of it. My life had taken a turn, but I was in control now, steering it in a direction that felt right. One afternoon, as I sat in my office crunching numbers, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. Hey, Liv, how about dinner tonight, just the two of us? I smiled and quickly typed a response. Sounds great, Dad. See you tonight. Every dinner I had with my dad was memorable. It was him who instilled in me the values of independence and strength. Our favorite diner, which was like home to us, was where we first met. Dad gave me a sweet look as we took our seats in the booth. How are you holding up, kiddo? I'm doing fine, Dad. I really am. Though it's been difficult, I'm getting by, I replied truthfully. He gave a nod. Kearney, you are strong. Has been for all time. I'm happy for you. We discussed everything and nothing, work and life. It felt familiar and reassuring. Later that week, I ran into Emily, an old acquaintance at the grocery store. It felt good to see her again after all these years of not talking. Courtney, a long time ago. How are you doing? Emily smiled warmly to greet me. Hi, Emily. I am doing fine. Thank you. Life has been interesting, I laughed in response. We caught up on old times over a lengthy conversation. Emily remarked, You seem different, Courtney, before they parted. More tranquilly. I paused to reflect. I suppose I am. After a long time, I'm at last in a decent place. Days became weeks, and weeks become months. I had taken back my life and my space. I spent time with friends, engaged in pastimes I had long since abandoned, and discovered happiness in the small things. One evening, my neighbor Mrs. Thompson passed by while I was enjoying tea on my veranda and taking in the sunset. She was an old woman, perceptive and always kind. Good night to you, Courtney. You look content these days, she said, resting her cane on her walking stick. I gave her a smile. Mrs. Thompson, good evening. Yes, I'm content. I'm there, even though it took some time. She gave a nod of approval. Well done, sweetheart. Each of us deserves to be happy. I sat there, taking in the quiet of the evening as she left. Even though the path had been lengthy and full of ups and downs, Looking back, I saw that every step and mistake had brought me to this point. I had given up a husband and an annoying mother-in-law, but I had gained something much more valuable, me. With a heart strong enough to begin over and a calculator in my head, I was perfect just the way I was.